So, as you all know, um, today is the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks committed by a terrorist organization known as Al Qaeda against the citizens of the United States. In my opinion, 9/11 is is in the top five worst things to ever happen in the history of this country, only really being beat by the Civil War, the institution of slavery, and the institution of several other discriminatory things against pretty much every marginalized group within the nation. In my opinion, those three are the only three that are bigger than 9/11. You could probably add Pearl Harbor into that brief list, but even at that, I don't think Pearl Harbor had as much casualties as 9/11 did. And so I'll be maybe sprinkling in just some general information about the tragedy as I do this speed run. My first act to remember the victims is I'm going to start this speed run by waiting in a moment of silence for approximately 9 seconds and 11 semiseconds, or I guess centiseconds. I'd like to invite you all to join me in this moment of silence for the victims. Thank you. The attack began around. This is going off of what I can remember. I haven't done much research leading up into this, but they began, I believe, around 8 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time. The first plane was flown into the first tower. Many people thought at first it was an accident because, well, of course, who would intentionally take a plane and plot and fly it into a building full of people? At this time, the idea of a kamikaze, or sorry, of a like suicide attack occurring against America hadn't exactly been a thing since the Japanese kamikaze pilots all the way back in World War II. Nobody thought that anyone hijacking a plane would do so simply for the purpose of plunging themselves and hundreds of people into certain death. Back then, most plane hijackings were somebody from, I guess, a still terrorist organization, but they wanted to get somewhere or force the plane to go somewhere to take people hostage. It was practically unheard of for somebody to hijack a plane for the purpose specifically of killing everyone on board and causing as much destruction as possible. So obviously, it was a huge shock to everyone when moments later the second tower was hit by another plane. By the time the first tower was hit, I'd like to say many Americans had their TVs on because it was spreading around in the news. But as soon as the second tower was hit, I'm sure everyone's TV was on because they knew that this was no accident. Over the course of a terrifying amount of time, the Twin Towers would essentially collapse under the seams of the crash. Many like to say that there were bombs placed inside the towers. I personally do not believe this, and many people claim that an airliner would not be able to take down a building. That is laughably idiotic, in my opinion, because it definitely could. Now you realize the two twin towers were basically just rectangles. They were giant vertical rectangles, cubes. They were giant vertical cubes, and so in my eyes, it's kind of like a fucking Jenga tower, you know. Now, obviously, that's a pretty shitty comparison, but you think about it. Every single level of that building has walls, walls that support the higher levels of the building. That's how a building fucking works. That's why walls exist. And so, when those walls were destroyed and the beams that held up the upper floors were melted by the jet airliner fuel, obviously both buildings were going to collapse in on themselves. And that's precisely what happened. Oh, well, that's funny. Millions of, well, the first thing we can say is that through modern science, I believe most of the people on the airlines were killed immediately as soon as they were thrusted into buildings. But the terrifying amount of death was experienced by the workers, the employees, the visitors of the towers on those higher levels because almost instantaneously, the exact same jet fuel that had caused the steel beams to melt was on fire. And any kind of probably fucking hundreds of fluid, dozens of fluids from those airplanes causing fire into the Twin Towers. And so many people on those higher floors could not get down. And so they had to make the terrifying choice between burning to death, suffocating to death, or plummeting down over 90 stories to their imminent death. The choice was death through pain, or the realization that it's over. And by that, I mean the imminent doom you get when you're falling. So essentially, pain. That was not planned. I did not mean to do that. I'm sorry. And it's a horrific thing, really, to think about. The fact that people had to make that choice simply because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, because they were working. I believe it was hours later. I'm not sure though, but eventually one of the planes hit the Pentagon, of course. It's one of the least talked about, probably because the Pentagon wasn't as much of a defining landmark as the Twin Towers, but obviously the Pentagon is just as important because it is where many government officials work and deliberate. The hit of the Pentagon was obviously an attempt at weakening our country's government by targeting those working within it. Now, of course, there is also the heroic story of the passengers of the fourth plane. The fourth plane was en route to hit DC, but somehow the passengers knew what it was going on, and they decided that they weren't going to let it hit the White House. They were able to overpower the hijackers and successfully crash the plane into a field, killing, I believe, no bystanders, but all dying in the process. Now, what they had done was an act of heroicism, more heroic than what most people would do. To know that they had chosen to essentially plummet to their certain doom, so that people within the populated area of DC would not have to see that, or would not have to even be in danger, is completely miraculous. This goes even We need to also mention the policemen and firefighters who also spent their lives trying to get as many people out and safe as possible. Many of those men and women died to save people. They didn't have to do that. Nobody had to do that, but they did because they cared. In my opinion, it was the most united the country ever was. There's not really many moments more uniting than something like that happening, which is honestly tragic because we should not have to wait until a terroristic act happens to be united over something. We shouldn't have to wait for things like the Charlie Kirk assassination to happen before we decide to find common ground. The common ground should be the fucking goal from the very start. There are many things that you cannot compromise on, such as human rights, equality. I'm at a loss for a third option, but I know I'll find it eventually. However, those things are two political aspects, and they are important aspects, but there are many more that common ground can certainly be found on. I don't think the government did a great job with their retaliatory attack. Um, Essentially, after the attack, George W. Bush famously declared war on terrorism, and the war on terror lasted all the way into Obama's presidency when it, I guess, kind of ended when the leader of Al Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, was killed. But along the way, tragically, thousands to millions of people in the Middle East were also bombed and killed by our own government to seek out a revenge that most Americans were fatigued by, I'd like to say 2007. 9/11 is extremely provocative because it was insane to think about the fact that even though, yes, America was actually very belligerent, I guess what I meant to say was that pretty much at war with several of those Islamist states in the Middle East and in Central Asia, I like to say. But none where, I mean, nobody thought that those states would go as far as to target civilians over the American military because of those wars. Sorry, my throat's kind of dry. It's hard to go on these talks. Man, I lost what I was going to say. I think political violence is bad. I think discriminatory violence is bad. I think violence against children is fucking terrible. And so I guess the whole point of this video is a sort of just, I guess, an advocacy thing. Maybe this video as well as the previous speedrun. Um, I just, I don't know. I just fucking really hate what happens in this world often. It's a fucking mess. I guess I'll take this period of silence to apologize for something else. Now, this isn't the first time I've spoken about 9/11 on this channel. Um, Last year, I made a community post about it. I'm not sure if you can even find it. I've made a lot of community posts since then, but when I was talking about the death record, I had accidentally counted the overall death, which included the terrorists, and I had accidentally labeled them as the part of the innocents. I am sorry for doing that. That is extremely disrespectful to the people who died as well as their families. Next time I try to make a sort of, I guess, conversational piece about something important, I'll try to do more research so I don't make such a fucking dumbass mistake again. Fucking moronic mistake. God damn it, let me through. I guess one more thing I want to say in this duo of more serious runs is that just try to treat everyone you meet with kindness, you know? You never know what someone else is going through in life. And it's always a good rule of thumb to treat them with kindness. I mean, in this day and age where so many people are solo in life, and I don't mean they're bad people, I mean that life has literally treated them like shit. Your kind word could literally be the difference between somebody choosing to live or die. And so I think it's important to be the light in a world that's full of dark. Not in a racist sentiment, a fucking hell no, but in the the powerful the powerful way of being a good person who brings a good energy into a room that is full of people who have suffered greatly. That's what I try to do with this channel. Um, that's honestly my biggest sort of, I guess, like inspiration to keep going or something. Cause like, yeah, you could say my videos only get 22 views or my shorts only get 10 likes, but like that's still 22 people whose days might have been better because of my content, because of something I said. I've gotten quite a few comments of people telling me that my videos were funny. So clearly, I have done something to make at least a few people's days a little bit better, and so it's completely worth it to me, in my opinion. Because I fucking know for sure school ain't doing shit to make anyone's day brighter. All right, well, if you watch these to the end, thanks a lot for watching these. Yeah. Hopefully, we should return to the usual kind of goofy, funny content tomorrow. Um, Especially with speedrunning. I have a lot of catching up to do. Um, yeah, that's about it. See you later.